And now, live from Jerusalem, you're listening to Israel-Inspired Radio. Here are your hosts, Rabbis Ari Abramowitz and Jeremy Gimpel.
Shalom, friends around the world. Welcome to Israel Inspired on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. This is Jeremy Gimpel. I'm here with Ari Abramowitz, and we are broadcasting from the Judean frontier, the last of the Judean mountains before the Judean desert, overlooking the Dead Sea. It is beautiful today. The winter is over, the sun is shining, and Ari has a new identity.
This is true. It's spring, new beginnings, and I'm very excited to announce that we have 2 new camels at the Arugot Farm.
2 new camels. What else do we have?
We have a little girl named Dvash. I became an Abba. It is, I'm probably going to start crying now. I've been crying so much. I haven't cried. I think I did the math 3 years. I haven't really cried.
You are about to cry.
I'm going to cry, and I've been crying every day, every time.
Man up already.
I know. I can't. Every time I look at this little girl changing her diaper and her little chin is quivering and she cries, and then I cry. Babies cry all the time, and I'm crying all the time. I became an Abba. It's, you know, for like how many years, Tehillah actually said that you were planning your family. You were like, we can't have a 3rd kid. Ari doesn't even have a kid yet.
Right. Thank God we didn't wait. You're 40.
Thank God you didn't build. Yes. Who even thinks about building their own family around their friend's schedule? It's not a normal thing to do. But anyways, but you shared your kids with me all these years, which was awesome because I love your children. They're like my own children. And I'm like the perpetual uncle. Everybody calls me Uncle Ari. And now I became an Abba. And I was nervous. Am I just like, do I love everybody else's kids? I'm not going to be the greatest Abba. It was like a wave. The truth is, the first 4 seconds, I had little moments of disappointment because I was convinced that this was a boy. But the minute that this baby came out and they handed her to me because Shayna just started bleeding profusely. I'm probably going to get in trouble for getting into too many details. She was just like bleeding out. So all these doctors rushed in and they handed the baby right out of her to me in my arms. So I'm thinking, I don't know, is Shayna going to live? I was terrified of that. And I'm holding this new baby in my arms and I'm blessing her, right? Yisimech Elohim Kesara, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, right? And Sarah, Rebecca, Leah are foremothers. And I was blessing her in Hashem's name. And we're singing Tehillim together as I'm hearing, is Shayna okay? What's going on? It was a very dramatic, very scary. In the middle of the delivery, we're like, Shayna's breathing and breathing through. She had to, before she went into labor, she had to give me her gun to hold. And in the middle of the delivery, right as the baby's coming out, the gun falls down off of me onto the floor. Huge clash. And the doctor's like, what's that? I'm like, oh, it's a gun. They're like, okay, what do you even do with that? It's like such a crazy life that we live. So you were
convinced that it was a boy. You didn't know beforehand. You didn't check.
We didn't check.
You wanted it to be a surprise.
I wanted it to be a surprise, but all of the doctors were saying, who, and I'm like, lo korim la ubar hu, but I was like, they say like, oh, we call every fetus by the masculine term, but I was sure that they were slipping up and it was really a boy and it was just supposed to be a boy. I was sure it was a boy. So when it came out as a girl, I'm like, no, maybe, it's me. You're mistaken. Look closer.
Look closer.
Give him time to grow. But I just fell madly in love with this little girl. I just love her to pieces. And and Shayna was a real hero. Natural birth, no epidural. It was very. I don't know how you've done that 6 times.
6 times. 6 times. And then the last time I had a baby, you gave me grief for not going to Miluim together with you. And I'm like, I just had a baby. And only now can you really look back and be like, wow, it's hard to have a baby.
Yeah.
You can't just leave your wife alone and go to Miluim.
Right. That's true. I was actually called up to Miluim and I was going to do it. And I asked Yishai, and Yishai was like, no, don't do it. Don't stay with you. So I'm like, okay, I didn't realize how critically important it is that I'm around right now. Because it doesn't make sense. It's the hardest period of time when she's the most depleted. She lost all this blood. She's exhausted. And now there's like a new baby that she has to take care of. We're both 40 years old. So this was the answer to all of our tefillot. Neither of us knew, are we ever going to have children? Is this going to be what's going to be? And like all of our prayers and prayers of so many people around the world praying for us.
I was already tired. I was tired of praying for you.
Yes. So
40 years. It's been a long time.
You've been praying for me for 40 years.
At least 20.
40 years in the desert. 20 years. Yes.
It's just a long time.
Yeah. So it's a very big deal, And so her great-grandmother, our daughter's great-grandmother, Her name was Esther Ziesel. She survived Auschwitz, a very special woman. Ziesel means sweet, and Esther, like Esther from the Purim story. So she passed away just a few months ago. So Ziesel means sweet, so we named our daughter Dvash, meaning honey, Esther, after her great-grandmother, who had a very powerful balance of attributes, from ability to be strong and answer the calling of the generation and face genocide of the Jewish people in the eye and overcome it, but not lose her sweetness and her kindness and her compassion. So we were blessing our daughter that she should have that same balance of attributes.
I think that really is the power of the Jewish people, that we're never just detached. There's always a connection. There's always a story. We light our Shabbat candles here, and it's Tehilah's great-grandmother's Shabbat candles. And she was born in the shtetl before the war. And you think about that, on the Jewish star in the middle of those Shabbat candles, it says Zion, Zion in Hebrew. And so Tehilah's great-grandmother, now we have already children, so it's her great-great-grandmother's children's around her Shabbat candles as she was in the shtetl in Poland, praying one day to return to Zion. And here we are in the mountains of Judea lighting her Shabbat candles. And so when people have an identity like Dvash Esther, that she knows that she's named after her great-grandmother that survived the ashes of Auschwitz, and from that was born in the mountains of Judea.
It's a legacy.
It's unbelievable.
It's a legacy. I even think about what Tehilah's grandfather said to you when you married into the family. Right? What did he say?
He said, you're entering into a family of 7 generations of rabbis and ritual slaughterers. Do you have smicha? And I'm like, smicha? I don't know. I like Pearl Jam. So yeah, that's the story of the Jewish people.
Yeah, so I'm an Abba, and also we have camels now.
We have camels. We have a mother and also a baby camel.
And yeah, and I'm super excited because when I first went into the Judean desert, we're right here on the cusp of the Judean desert. And when I first went in there, it was like this mystery, magical, enchanting world of wandering camels and Bedouin cemeteries. And it was just so enchanting and so beautiful. And I saw these albino camels. I'm like, that's probably the last thing I have in the world that I don't have that I want. It's just an albino camel. And now we have an albino camel.
An albino camel. Do they have names yet? I don't think they have names.
I think Yossi called them, one is Gamal and one is Gamla.
Okay.
I don't know.
We need to come up with some good names. Look, we have 2. We have 2 camels.
And for our listeners around the world, we have here Adam, Amasa, and Tamir, who are filming our podcast right now. They're broadcasters, they're documentarians, very unbiased, very good guys, and they live here in the land of Israel, and that's whose voice you just heard. Breaking the third wall.
All right.
Okay, and Jeremy, so in addition to the 2 camels, which is very exciting because, as you know, it's been quite a drama with our animals out here. We had a big flock of animals, and then money was frozen by the Swiss government, so we needed to use those sheep that we had to pay our contractor to continue building, which is cool because we're in Judea. We're Judeans. We're paying with sheep. This is how things are supposed to go. It's just right. But so many things are happening right now. Like the building is moving forward. Spring is starting. We just had this big group of crazy vehicles come here. Half of them had to be towed away. Did you see that?
I didn't see that.
Yeah, half of them had to be towed away. I went up to them. There was this like massive group, maybe 300 people that just stopped here and spent the night here. It was called Grotorali. Is that how you pronounce it?
Right.
Grotorali.
Because a gruta'a in Hebrew is like a junky car and a rally car. So they've taken these junky old cars and they've souped them up a little bit to make them just ready to go through anything.
They were like just insane things all over them, Chabad flags and anyway, so they're going through and they slept here overnight. The rule is, they said, you have to buy a vehicle. It cannot cost over 3,000 shekels. And then they just go through the entire country and meet everything and everywhere and stop in cool places. And they just swarmed our farm the other night. There's just so much vibrance and excitement and cool things that are happening here. And I feel like we made it through the winter. This winter was a little bit brutal. It was a little brutal. But, I mean, your house, how did your windows hold up?
A lot better than last year.
Last year it was like a waterfall into your house.
A flood into my house. A flood. It wasn't like leaking windows. It was flooding windows that flooded my house.
Yeah. So, and it's the side of the house that faces the Arugot Valley because of the extraordinary winds that come in. But now it's spring and building is happening. And please God, when do you think we're going to finish the retreat center already?
I think the outside of the building is going to be finished by the end of this year. So will the Beit Tefillah, our house of prayer, and so will the pools and the gardens. This year is a big year. And it's just amazing to think that we got here 4 years ago and there wasn't any electrical infrastructure, water infrastructure. There weren't any trees. There was just nothing here. And now in 2 weeks, we're having a group of Germans, Holland people, is that a Dutch people, Dutch people, yeah. Canadians and Americans that are going to live here for about 10 days, kind of tenting it out here because it's still a little bit camping, and work alongside us building this place up. It's like the dream that we had to open this place up to the world. We're now moving even beyond just day trips where there's really a group coming to live here, to learn here, to work here. It's like the dream is happening. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it was last Shabbat that you came to me, you needed a key to the back gate because a big group of Germans were coming to eat Shabbat dinner with you. What was that?
I don't know. That just happens sometimes. Some girl that ran away from a Haredi house literally knocked on my door and she's like, I don't have a place to stay for Shabbat. And I'm like, okay, welcome. And she just was this marvelous, amazing girl, so like intelligent and so young. And she literally just kind of like left her family behind and pretty much just moved to Israel without any family here. And then at the same time, this group of Germans said that they heard that we host people for Shabbat and they wanted to come and experience a Shabbat in Judea. So we had a Haredi girl from Muncie and a bunch of Germans from Germany spending Shabbat together here in the mountains of Judea. Talk about a weird bunch of people.
Yeah, that's true. And just yesterday we had a Midrashah come here, and these girls from like New York came here and were walking around, and then the eagles came out. Have you been seeing these eagles?
I have.
It's called an Ait Zahuv.
Right.
Ait Zahuv, right? So they're super rare in the entire world. They're an endangered species, and 3 of them happen to live right here on the mountain right next to us. So they come out at very auspicious, special occasions. And whenever they come out, I tell people, like, the legend is that when they come out, it's a sign for fertility, or it's a sign, I make something up, whatever it is. Legend says, when you say legend says, you literally can say anything you want because it's a legend. Like,
and then you just made the legend up right now.
You make the legend up.
Right there.
As if there's a legend that's not made up by some dude on the spot. Anyways, yeah, so the farm is going well.
I sort of just want to address that point really quickly. I want to just retract what Ari's saying. When the eagles come out, it really is an auspicious moment.
It really is an auspicious moment.
It really is something marvelous, and there is something about the universe speaking to us through nature itself, that somehow Hashem, through nature, through animals, there's some sort of
I don't know what it means, but every time
there.
the eagles come out, it is a special time.
Yeah, it's a wake up.
It's a wake up. It's a special time. They're very powerful. If you come up close to them, I saw one standing right in front of me. It looked like a gargoyle. It was like a massive, massive, powerful creature.
No, its wingspan is something like 6 to 7 feet. It's huge.
Yes.
When it opens its wings, it's like a massive eagle.
So every time I look up and the eagles are there, it's definitely, yes. I didn't mean to say, oh, legends, I make up the legends.
No, but
I'm just joking around.
It's just really amazing to like read about the Ait in the Tanakh. We're talking about that eagle that lives right out here in these mountains.
And what's so cool about this is we're talking about eagles and old junked up motor cars, but meanwhile, there's a whole world of things that are happening right now in the world of politics in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank, the Trump peace plan. Our place here is like it would have been, according to the Trump peace plan, in a state of Palestine. Right here is where it would be.
We would be enclave number 8.
Yeah, we are enclave, meaning the map is different because of what we did here.
Entirely surrounded by a Palestinian state. There would be Ari and Jeremy in enclave number 8.
We would be like the Florida of the state of Israel within Palestine.
That's what does that mean, the Florida?
It's like a peninsula. Florida is a peninsula surrounded by 3 sides by water.
No, it would be more like we're the Bahamas, surrounded by an ocean all alone. Florida's sort of connected to Georgia.
Right.
We would literally be like just an island.
By the way, I find infuriating. Everybody loves Trump so much. And you know what? He's done some good things for Israel, and I'll give him credit for that. And I think he's well-intentioned in his desire to do this Trump peace plan. But the fact is, for a foreign power, another country, to come into the state of Israel and start dictating to us what our borders are and that we have to give our ancient heartland, the heritage of our very essence of our identity, to a enemy that wants to wipe us off the map, for them to dictate such a thing, even if they're well-intentioned, but everyone's like, oh, you know what, the Palestinians, the Arabs, they're going to say no. But why do we have to count on them? Why do we have to count on the implacability and uncompromising nature of the Arabs? Why can't we be uncompromising too? I don't know. The whole thing sort of throws me off. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, on one hand, it's the most pro-Israel American peace plan that's ever been issued. It's just undeniable. And President Trump is the most pro-Israel president Israel's ever seen.
Again, I said good intentions.
Yeah,
good
but with
president.
that said, a lot of this was guided from Israel. A lot of times Israel is really the guiding force here. America, it's silly to point fingers and blame Trump or blame Bush for the disengagement. Ariel Sharon did the disengagement. And the truth is, Netanyahu is the one that has been pushing this peace plan. He was the architect.
Take responsibility.
Take responsibility.
Yeah, no, I understand.
But even more than that, what was marvelous about the Trump peace plan is it has empowered the individual in ways never imagined before. Every single Jew that has conquered a mountain here is to stay. Not one Jew is to be evacuated. So what does that mean? That means that Ari, Jeremy, Yossi, and Roni, 4 families, moved to this mountain. We've changed the map. We will not be evacuated. What would have happened if 4 years ago there were 400 Ari and Jeremys and Yossis and Ronis, and we caught 400 other mountains? There'd be enclave number 12, enclave number 13. None of them are to be removed. And so in some ways, it's really like, wow, one person can really actually make a difference. Because even the right-wing pragmatists, it used to be, well, we're talking here about settlement blocks, the big settlement blocks, they'll stay. But now we're seeing like, wow, every place the Jewish people settle will remain in Jewish hands. Let's go settle the entire desert. That's up to us now.
Right. I wouldn't even say settle. We have to watch our language very carefully. It's really liberate or return. We're returning. Reclaim. We're returning to our own, we're talking about such a tiny little sliver of land, the size of Rhode Island. The whole world is up in arms about the insanity of a Jew living in Judea. It's so crazy what's happening in the whole world. And I have to say, this is all compounded a little bit in my mind. I just had a little girl, this little infant that's so helpless, and the whole world is being overtaken by this coronavirus.
What does that have to do with anything?
What has to do with the craziness of I had this thought. Sometimes you just go back to the basics, right? And the coronavirus is spreading rampantly throughout the world. You see the Iranian health minister is saying, no, everything's fine, as he's sweating, schwitzing, and falling apart. It turns out he had the coronavirus, as he's telling everybody everything's fine. The whole Iranian government, they say that the Pope may have it's spread throughout the whole world. And I had this thought in my heart, just do we not see that all of mankind is sick? We're all getting sick together. We're all interconnected. Can we not just put aside the missiles for a second? Can we not just take I know it's a silly, basic sort of thought, but I'm just watching that the fights and the wars are still happening. Can we just not do that for a moment and just take a breather, quarantine ourselves as a species, just think we're all human beings? We're all human beings that are sick with the same thing. Maybe there's a deeper message there, that we're all interconnected. We're all one mishpacha. We're all one family. I don't know.
I have another message.
Okay.
Flights from Europe have been canceled to Israel. That can happen, folks. Israel can just shut its borders down. And now imagine what happens if you're in the United States and flights are canceled. And who knows what this coronavirus might do. It looks like it's going to trigger some type of recession, because people are not running to the ball game. People are not running to movie theaters. People aren't running to the malls. It's already
triggered a huge
recession.
People
don't want, the recession hasn't even begun to fight yet.
Did you see the stock market? It went down 10,000 points.
And then it went back up. And I'm saying that it hasn't even started yet. People haven't even started to feel the ripple effects of what it means when the people of America stop going shopping.
Well, it's a perfect storm, because it's very communicable. You don't have any symptoms and you're already able to pass it on, so people are giving it to each other without even knowing.
But just understand, meaning there are Jews that are in Switzerland right now. We have one friend in particular. She can't get to Israel. She wants desperately to get here, and she can't make it. She's stuck in Switzerland. She can't come home. And people are saying now that Israel is the safest country in the world because Israel is the only one that's first being honest with its citizens. We've quarantined 100,000 people. The health ministry are giving orders not to kiss mezuzahs, to stay. Baby Netanyahu said, say namaste now, don't shake people's hands, being very open and honest about the realities of this virus. And 4 years ago, this mountain was at least perceived as the most dangerous place in the world. But now situated in the state of Israel, alone on a mountain, we're actually probably the safest place in the world.
The safest place.
And how that has just turned upside down. It's just unbelievable how this world works and how fragile everything really is. Just like one little virus that no one can even see is about to throw the entire world economy for a roller coaster ride. And we don't even know what's going to happen.
And how did it even come about? Some dude ate a bat and didn't cook it well enough, and now hundreds of thousands of people around the world are going to die. It just shows the unpredictability, the fragility. They call it a black swan. You know the black swan? It means that unpredictable event that nobody could have ever foreseen that changes the entire course of world history. Oh, and maybe not in the most cosmic terms, but your wife, Tila, she was talking about, yes, the last time this happened was the flu of 1918, and this is more lethal than that. And
how does she know this stuff?
She just Googles a lot, I guess, which is weird because you don't have internet here on the farm. But yeah, it shows that no matter the technological advances, how much we all feel like we're in control of our environment and everything around us. Some dude in China eats a bat, and the whole world is reeling in terror and fear.
I want to open up a corner for the show today. It's called the Tanakh Corner, and a piece of advice for all of our listeners. Here it is. Psalm 91. That psalm, it seems like, was written for the coronavirus, written for a time like this. And it is so beautiful. I've read it now already 3 or 4 times, and I'm sharing it with different friends of mine because I have some friends that they're just very nervous people. They're just anxious people, and they're terrified about the coronavirus. They don't know what's going to be, how many people are dying, what's going on, what's the fatality rate. And because really no one knows anything about anything, Psalm 91 is just about trusting in Hashem's protection from all plagues and from all sicknesses. And right now there's like a global plague that's striking everywhere. And Psalm 91 is really encouraging, and just Hashem knows what he's doing. And we just have to sort of walk in faith, knowing that we don't really have control anyway. We have an illusion that we have some sort of control over this world, but we don't really have control.
And anyways, even if we did get it, God forbid, we really don't have anything to worry about, because only if you're 40 or above and you're in bad shape do you have to be concerned about anything. And you and I are in pretty good shape. We just hit 40, but we're in good shape. I think we'll be fine.
I'm in better shape than you by a long shot.
Do you want to arm wrestle here in front of all of our listeners around the world? I'm sure that as I'm beating you, you'll be like, I'm winning, I'm winning. That's the power of radio over television. But yeah, so no, but you're right. You're right. We really don't have control over it. And throwing our hands up in the air is really an art and a skill, because on the one hand, I have this sort of graph in my head. There's like the x-axis and the y-axis. And the x-axis is hishtadlut, doing your best to try within your power to make things a certain way, to stay healthy, to stay safe, to make a living, to do those things. And the y-axis is anxiety and negative emotions. Right? So the more you try, the minute you try so hard that it's causing you anxiety and fear and doubt, that's when you have to throw your hands up in the air and say, okay, it's really in God's hands. It's like a balance. It's a balance of what to do. But yeah, you know, we're also approaching Purim right now.
Do you know who's so happy about this whole virus before we go into Purim? All of my prepper friends. I have a lot of friends that have just been waiting for this. They're ready to live on their house for like 4 years.
Dude, we're not just friends. We're best friends.
Best.
We're best friends. I have hundreds of cans of tuna. For years, I've been hoarding antibiotics. Every time I go to the doctor, I'm like, I'm feeling sick. He's like, all right, I'll write you antibiotics. I've been filling those prescriptions. I have boxes of antibiotics, all sorts of like canned goods, huge amounts of water. I'm going to be in a real position
you are an
that
amateur.
I can buy your children from you in exchange for antibiotics.
I know. I have some friends that live in Middle America that are professionals. They are ready. They are ready. They have bunkers. They have dried, frozen food that could go to the moon. They are ready for any scenario. And they're like, finally, the coronavirus. We can finally eat all this stuff. Like they're like so excited that they can finally
They got their weapons.
They are ready.
Yeah, totally. But that, I think also Purim is part of that message. It's coming at a good time, the coronavirus, because Purim is a reminder that this veil of nature, we look around. Why is it that we cover our eyes every morning and every night when we say Shema Yisrael? Why do we cover our eyes? So for that moment when we're declaring the unity of God, we're also able to cover up this illusion of multiplicity. As we look around and it seems like there's this leader and this threat and that threat, and we'll remember, oh, there's one God in the world that actually controls everything. And this whole world is a mask. That behind this mask is God, who's in control and loves us and wants only good for us, and only good things are going to happen. Even if they're painful, we know that it's good for some reason that we don't fully understand. So it's important. This is an opportunity. You know, these holidays roll around. Purim is a time that is auspicious for the internalization of this truth, that God really runs the entire world. And we're supposed to wipe out Amalek, right? That's what Purim is about, killing Haman. Haman is Amalek, and what is Amalek? It's doubt. And you have to wipe out Amalek. But when you erase something, you have to erase it. What are you going to write in its place? You have to have something to write in its place. And I think that that's the part of the message. We have to be willing to write words of faith, words of conviction. You know, not in English, the word is emunah, right? But there's also bitachon. Emunah is faith, but bitachon is, how would you define bitachon? Trust. Right, so what's the difference between faith and trust in your mind?
So the way that I define it is that emunah it's moments of inspiration. It's moments of revelation. It's like, wow, I can see God's intervention right now in my life. This is a moment of faith. Then bitachon is sort of walking in that realization that you had long after that inspiration is now lost. How long can you really grow and walk in that moment where you had a truth, you experienced it, you knew it then, but after 3 or 4 days, the memory is sort of like, did that really happen? Was that,
right?
Did that? So that's where trust comes in, where it's like walking in that faith.
In another dimension, emunah is intellectual. The way I understand it, it's like an intellectual understanding. And bitachon is the internalization of that intellectual knowledge to where it actually has physiological effects, to where you're feeling anxious and wound up, but then you're able to internalize this faith, and it causes you to calm down on a physiological level. Your body is releasing less cortisol, less fear, and you're able to walk in a deeper level of serenity that has a real effect, meaning that's like it's not abstract, but it's internalized to be a part of who you are. So I guess we should maybe wind down right now, this show, and bless our listeners in Israel, around the world, that we should really be able to internalize the message of Purim, that this whole world is a mask, and God is really running the show. And v'na'afochu, all of these evil, terrible things, coronavirus somehow is going to be flipped around, and we're going to see how it was the greatest blessing, and it was part of the story of the unfolding redemption of the Jewish people and all of mankind.
It seems also a lot of times when hard times hit, that's when we really like to pray. When things are rocking and rolling, it's like, all right, I'll say thank you, but like, it doesn't really come from that place of like a ze'akah, like a call out to God. And so this is a real opportunity to really discover Psalm 91. It really is a psalm of protection. It's a psalm of healing. And it's a chance to really like speak the words of King David, but in our mouths and in our time. And it was literally designed for this time right now. So that's our gift to you, Psalm 91. Check that out.
King David's gift to you. I don't know if you could quite
no, I mean, I'm just,
that.
No, I'm owning it in that I'm sharing them Psalm. It's a big book. There's 150 chapters. Which one are you going to open to? I'm giving them like the codex. It's like Psalm 91. Go right to it. You'll love it.
Hashtag Psalm 91.
Nice.
Open up a new corner of hashtags on our show. All right. Anyways, Ari at the Land of Israel. You can reach out to Jeremy at the Land of Israel. And it's been a pleasure being back. We're going to do this every week. Right?
This time we mean it.
This time we mean it. Shalom, shalom. Purim Sameach.
While we're facing a threat of an endemic disease, we conducted a whole election. Nothing can stop our Jewish democratic state. We want to have a say in the future of the Jewish people that is being written as we speak. We are in the glory days of the Jewish people, and even more glorious days are yet to come because of the strength that the Jewish people showed in this election.
Listen to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman, political correspondent for the Jerusalem Post, every week on thelandofisrael.com.
Shalom, and now we are here with a very special guest, a very special interview. My dear friend and brother, Yehuda HaKohen, with whom I have great disagreements, but even greater respect for his self-sacrifice and dedication to the Jewish people and to his extraordinary work for Israel. And I love hanging out with him, particularly because of our differences, because I feel like I've definitely grown and evolved because of our arguments, because of the truth within them. I'm very excited to have him on the program now. We're in a very special time in Israel's history, in Jewish history, and many of you may not even know this entire campaign, this entire war is going on within the WZO. So we're going to talk to Yehuda a little bit more in depth, but Yehuda, first just tell me, WZO, what is it?
It stands for World Zionist Organization, Ari.
Tell me what about it.
No, so the World Zionist Organization was created by Benjamin Ze'ev Herzl in 1897 in order to create a movement that would bring the Jewish people back to the land of Israel. And I guess the big question we have to ask is why 53 years after the liberation of Jerusalem do we still have a Zionist organization or a Zionist Congress?
So answer that question.
Well, the way I would answer the question is by saying that
the question itself, you're asking, it should be obsolete by this point.
I'm saying that, yeah, it doesn't really make sense in the surface that there would still be a World Zionist Congress or a World Zionist Organization 53 years after the return to Zion. It seems like Zionism, as this kind of, as it was defined by its thought leaders at the time, has succeeded. Or to a certain extent, or it succeeded in accomplishing many of the aspirations of the Jewish people, like the revival of the Hebrew language, the ingathering of the exiles, the cultivation of our soil, the liberation of our country from British rule, and ultimately, in 6 incredible days, the liberation of the cradle of Jewish civilization, including Jerusalem, including Zion. And yet this World Zionist Organization continues to exist, and roughly every 5 years, we have a World Zionist Congress. And the question is why? Why is it important? Why should we care? Why should we participate? And what
happens at this World Zionist Congress? Let's start there.
Well, so there's a lot of Jews, first of all, from all over the world get together. And it's a big tent of self-defined Zionists from all over the world who are meeting to, ultimately what is happening is beneath the surface. This is usually like more behind the scenes. If you were to go to a World Zionist Congress, you would see is a lot of networking, a lot of committees, a lot of people discussing things, and some resolutions being passed and some resolutions being debated. But what's happening behind the scenes is a lot of jobs and budgets are being allocated that impact the direction the Jewish people take and the state of Israel takes.
So it's not just abstract or symbolic. There's real
there's real stuff going on, but you have to be powerful to be privy to the real stuff. You have to be able to come in powerful to be able to put your hands on the real stuff.
So what are the real stuff?
Well, first of all, billions of dollars in annual budget that should, in my opinion, be going towards identifying and achieving the next goals of Jewish liberation. Meaning,
where are these billions of dollars coming from?
Hold on a second. If we're saying that there's still a Zionist movement over 50 years after the return to Zion, then in my opinion, the best use of the achievements of Zionism, the conditions created by Zionism's success, by the resources of the official Zionist movement, all of those things should be allocated and utilized towards identifying and achieving the next goals of Jewish history. Figuring out where we are in the map of Geula, where we are on the map of redemption, where we are on the map of Jewish liberation, what Zionism succeeded in accomplishing, meaning what are the goals of Jewish history, what were achieved by Zionism, by the Zionist movement, what's left to achieve, and how can we now utilize the conditions created by Zionism's success and the resources available to the Zionist movement in order to identify and accomplish the next goals of Jewish history. And that's something that hasn't really been done yet, because Zionism has become such a catch-all and such a big tent. You know, at the World Zionist Congress, you will see J Streeters, and you will see ZOA people, and you will see the Reform movement, and you will see the Modern Orthodox movement, and even some Haredim. And in order to get them all in one organization, there's been kind of a watering down of ideology. And so the Vision movement, the movement I'm involved with, that is running a slate of young activists to enter the World Zionist Congress, is saying, no, we need to actually have real conversations about what the next goals of Jewish history are. We don't need to agree, but we need to have real conversations collectively. The people of Israel, whether in the state of Israel or in the diaspora, need to have real conversations about what the next goals of Jewish history are, and we need to figure out how to utilize the resources available to us to achieve those goals.
Okay, you said earlier of the big umbrella, I think you said, the big tent of all these organizations. You said self-defined Zionists.
Right, people who would call themselves Zionists. Means... Would
you disagree with the label of Zionist for any of them?
I don't know. It means so many different things to so many different people, so I think it's pointless to argue over the word one way or another. I'm interested in Jewish liberation. I'm interested in advancing the Geula. I'm interested in achieving the goals that we say in the Amidah 3 times a day. That's what I'm interested in personally, and advancing Jewish history to the next stage. You can call it what you want. You want to call it Zionism? Go ahead. But the truth is, Zionism, when it really was officially Zionism, like in the time of Herzl and Ahad Ha'am and Jabotinsky and Katznelson, etc., had many different ideological streams that all saw Zionism differently. And so, you know, some didn't even want a Jewish state, or wouldn't say outright that they wanted a Jewish state. So I think that, you know, there's enough room to argue that all of these different groups represent a stream of Zionism as applied today. Now, it's interesting that the two groups that I might identify with the most in the pre-state period, the Rav Kook group and the Lehi, the Lochamei Chirut Yisrael, the Fighters for the Freedom of Israel, actually did not call themselves Zionists. Rav Kook has a quote where he actually says, Zionism is such a shallow ideology that it's too shallow to even sustain a living nation, let alone revive a dead nation. And although Rav Kook said we have to look at what the Kadosh Baruch Hu is doing here and who he's doing it through and support this, because the return of Zion is an important step in Jewish liberation, regardless of whether or not the people practically implementing it or driving it are aware of what they're doing and the importance of what they're doing.
Well, I think any ism would have been too small for Rav Kook.
Perhaps. And Lehi was very careful to say, we're not Zionists. We are an indigenous people's liberation movement that's fighting against British colonial rule in our land, just like the Zealots fought the Romans and the Maccabees fought the Greeks. We are the continuation of that.
Okay, so I imagine you mentioned a few of the, let's say, more left-wing parties, but there's also, right-wing parties, nationalist parties.
I mentioned Jabotinsky. I threw him in there intentionally.
No, I'm talking about the WZO.
Oh, the WZO today.
The WZO today, right? So there's, you said it's a big umbrella. There's a lot of parties from right-wing to nationalistic to left-wing to liberal, reform, orthodox, conservative. Where does the Vision Party fit in here?
So Vision is mostly younger people. The majority of people on the Vision slate are actually university students who are very involved in the struggles of our people in this chapter of Jewish history, who are also very involved in really asking these questions, decolonizing Jewish identity, trying to formulate what the goals of Jewish history are right now, and to be thought leaders in that struggle. One of the things that might separate, just to go back for a moment, one of the things that I think separated the Rav Kook / Stern group from the Zionist group is that for the most part, the Zionists related to the Jewish people as an object with a problem. That problem could be assimilation, that problem could be persecution, that problem could be homelessness, but ultimately Zionism was being marketed and presented as a solution to that problem. Whereas both Rav Kook and the leaders of Lehi related to the Jewish people as a subject with desires, meaning that even if there was no anti-Semitism and no persecution and no assimilation and no threats in the diaspora, we would still be pushing to come back to our land and to declare independence again and to rebuild Hebrew civilization, because that's what our people deeply, deeply want in our collective soul. And that's the purpose of Jewish history. And that is the purpose of human history, that we can only fulfill our function, our historic role through an independent Jewish state in our land.
Okay, so it's not reactionary.
No, not at all.
Jewish people are not reactionary.
Whereas Zionism was.
It's like it's the idea that there's two primary motivations that can motivate you in life: either fear or desire.
Right. So I would say that the Rav Kook / Lehi group were about desire, whereas the Zionist group was about fear. And we today, our group, the Vision Movement, is about desire, not about fear.
Okay.
Okay. That separates us from all the other parties right away.
Okay, well, that definitely sounds, whether it's fear, I'm sure many of them wouldn't identify that fear is motivating them. Nonetheless, they would come and say, well, this is the problem that needs to be answered. This is the problem that we're reacting to.
Right. No, well, I think that's okay. I think it's okay to identify the challenges confronting the Jewish people because we can't be blind. We have to be able to overcome those challenges. And of course, those are also things that the resources of the Zionist movement should be going towards. But we have to, but before you analyze the problems or the challenges confronting us, you have to know your goal. If you don't know your goal, if you don't know where Am Yisrael is supposed to go, then you don't know what is necessarily an obstacle. You might confuse something for an obstacle that isn't, or you might think something isn't an obstacle when it is. So if you don't know your goal, if you don't know where you're supposed to be going, then it's very difficult to know how to identify an obstacle and overcome the obstacle. So I think it's very, very, and that of course comes back to the separation, even in the time of World War II, when Yair Stern identified the British as the enemy, the British as the obstacle, even though the Holocaust was about to happen, and even though World War II was taking place, had just broken out, because the British were the ones occupying our homeland and preventing us from being a free people that can act as a player on the world stage instead of like a persecuted people being kicked around by the players.
Right. Okay. So there's Mizrahi. Our listeners out there have heard of Mizrahi. We've spoken about Mizrahi before. We've interviewed them. We're friends with them. They are very much, I guess, if you had to put an ism, religious Zionist. Yeah. There's the ZOA right there also.
They're the revisionists. I would say ZOA and Likud are together with some other people as well. And I think for the most part, they represent kind of a revisionist Zionist, Jabotinsky, and I would also say a very kind of like Western conservative, which is very Jabotinsky actually, force. There's a lot of like Western conservatism there.
Okay. So in a practical way, how would Vision be different than the success of Mizrahi or ZOA, Likud, or anyone else on these sort of nationalist or right-wing party groups?
Well, first of all, we have a proven record of doing, of accomplishing some really unbelievable feats, both in Jewish education in terms of inspiring college students to become active participants in Jewish history, to see themselves as characters in the story of Am Yisrael. I think that's something we're very good at, and we would like to be able to utilize the funds and educational departments of the World Zionist Organization to be able to do that on a mass scale. Part of it is just being...
So you would be focusing more on education.
Well, no, that's one thing. For the last 5 years, I think our biggest accomplishment over the last 5 years that no one else really did is that we were able to redirect a lot of the money of the Zionist institutions towards buying land in Judea and Samaria. We are able to use, we have been able over the last 5 years to use the resources of the Zionist movement to resist a two-state solution through land purchases in Judea and Samaria. That is something that we've been doing, and that's something that we want to keep doing, but we need to come in strong in order to do it.
And that's something that Mizrahi or Likud, ZOA would not do.
I'm not sure. They didn't initiate it. I imagine many of them would support it. There might be people in Mizrahi who are two-staters, because there are people in the quote-unquote religious Zionist camp who identify as two-staters, as I'm sure you know, and many of your listeners probably know. So I wouldn't be surprised if that exists on the Mizrahi slate, that there are people who think a two-state solution is the way to go, and they have rabbis who would give halachic approval to that, just not my rabbis and perhaps not your rabbis. In ZOA, I doubt anyone would support a two-state solution, although the ZOA's position on the two-state solution officially is they reject a two-state solution that could endanger Israel or empower forces that would endanger Israel, whereas our position is that we're against it because we demand our entire country be free from foreign rule. It's not a question of danger. It's not a question of security. It's not a question of how good or bad the people we'd be potentially giving our land to. It's just about the fact that this is our homeland, and somebody who understands that doesn't divide it.
So it's the difference is a foundational
ideological.
posture. That's what you say.
Well, not just a posture. We've had a good 5 years of utilizing the resources of the Zionist movement towards resisting a two-state solution. Now, I'm not saying ZOA is a bad party to support. ZOA is more focused on other things, like, for example, passing anti-BDS resolutions. Now, in the Zionist Congress, I personally don't. First of all, I personally don't think top-down anti-BDS resolutions are ever really effective. Or
I also think it sounds a little ridiculous. Anti-BDS. What is BDS? It's anti. So it's anti resolution.
But,
it's a lot of anti there instead of what you're saying.
Right, but within the Zionist movement, to pass anti-BDS resolutions in the Zionist movement, to me, feels a little bit silly, honestly. Also, they recently passed something saying that we're not allowed to say West Bank anymore. We have to say Judea and Samaria. I don't know what that means practically, if people saying West Bank will be fined. Honestly, I don't have a big problem with the term West Bank. Obviously, I prefer Judea and Samaria just because it's like my people's cultural word for these places. But I do get frustrated, I guess, or I get a little bit annoyed when people refer to Judea and Samaria as a synonym. I like calling Samaria, Samaria. I like calling Judea, Judea. And sometimes I'll refer to the two of them collectively as the West Bank.
Well, I'm sort of surprised, though, that you don't have a problem with the term West Bank, being that from the sounds of what you're saying, you recognize the critical importance of language.
Yeah,
in creating our thinking and creating our posture.
Right. So the West Bank is what most of the world today calls the cradle of Jewish civilization. It's land we're absolutely determined to hold on to, that should be part of the state of Israel, that if anything, it's Israel proper, whereas Tel Aviv and Netanya are greater Israel. This is where our whole civilization developed. This is where our ancestors are from. This is where most of our national story has taken place. And these are the lands that our people struggled to come back to for 2,000 years. Now, people can call, I get hung up on certain words and some words I don't, and it's totally fine with me. I totally understand why you or ZOA or anybody else might have a big issue with the term West Bank. It's not something that frustrates me. I get much more annoyed when I hear people use words like settler or settlement. That bothers me on a much deeper level. Because
that's interesting. It doesn't bother me as much.
Okay, exactly. So to each his own. And if you want, we can have a show where we, talk about why I'm more bothered by these words and you're more bothered by those words. But I think the word settler in English has a very colonialist connotation. It's almost like saying alien, colonizer, whereas the word mitnachel in Hebrew, which is the word commonly used for you Jews like you and I who live in Judea, that actually has a connotation of indigeneity, like nachala. So I think it's interesting.
Nachala means heritage, which, by the way, I like to point out. No, there's a difference between an inheritance and a heritage. An inheritance is something you could give away. Your dad leaves you money, you could give it away. A heritage is part of who you are. It's part of your essential identity. So that's an important distinction to make, which is part of why I like we're mitnachlim, we're not mitrashim.
Right. So we're mitnachlim, but I'm not a settler. I don't want to live as a settler. I don't want to be a settler. I'm proud to be a mitnachel. And I think the best English word I've heard so far to translate that into is Judean.
Judean.
That works for me.
I like Judean. And I also agree, by the way, with your point about Judea and Samaria. We don't say, let's say Mexico started saying, Texas and Arizona, like we have to group them together because they do. No, it's Texas and there's Arizona. There's two
like when I hear a student
distinct
saying,
places.
When I hear a student saying they're going to Judea and Samaria for Shabbat, I'm like, where are you going?
Right.
Like, just tell me where you're going. Like you're going to Hebron, you're going to Judea. You're going to Alan Moreh, you're going to Samaria. You're going to Beit El, you're going to Judea. By the way, a lot of people don't realize that Judea extends way north of Jerusalem. People always think of Jerusalem as like the border and everything south is Judea, everything north is Samaria. The truth is, I live on a mountain near Beit El and I live in northern Judea.
Well, from what you've told me, though, where you live in Beit El is the border. It's the border of Samaria, Judea and Samaria.
The border is actually Har Bal Chatzor, which is north of Ofra. It's where Avram Avinu.
So according to what you're saying, you are
between.
Clearly within Judea.
I'm clearly within Judea, but from a tribal perspective, I'm on the border between Binyamin and Ephraim. So when the kingdom split, my mountain was like the southern part of the kingdom of Israel and not included in the kingdom of Judea.
Okay.
It's complicated because there's so many different, what part of the problem when we talk about this land and we talk about different regions in this land is there's so many layers of history and so many events that took place that depending on the time period and depending on who was deciding what, within our own people, never mind Palestine, Eretz Canaan, West Bank, I'm talking about just like Judea and Samaria versus Kingdom of Judea, Kingdom of Israel versus tribe of Judah, tribe of Benjamin, tribe of Ephraim. There's already so many like layers there that it becomes very complicated to unpack. But in terms of Judea and Samaria, I'm in northern Judea.
So when we say Judea, we're not saying the tribe of Judah, because that is much more limited than the kingdom of Judah, when the kingdom of Israel and kingdom of Judah were divided. So the kingdom of Judah is what you're talking about, Judea today.
Not exactly, but we can get very stuck on this point.
Let's move on. You mentioned one of your students tell you they're going to Judea and Samaria. This, I understand, Vision is a student movement.
It's largely a student movement, and again, it's students who have already come to the conclusion. There are older people on the list as well, a lot of young professionals and people who've been political organizers for a long time, in their communities, trying to advance Jewish history, trying to have real conversations about whether or not, Jews are white, whether or not Jews belong in the United States, whether or not, what our identity is. I think there's a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack when it comes to decolonizing Jewish identity and realizing that we're not just like Americans with a Jewish religion, those of us who are living in America. I know you and I both did live in the United States at some point in our lives, but actually, descendants of Bnei Israel who happen to live in the United States because of a crime committed against them by Roman imperialists who destroyed our civilization and uprooted us from our soil.
Or alternatively, because of our own sins, which for
again,
which we
levels
were
and levels
from
and
our
levels
land.
of understanding. They're both true. Both are absolutely true.
Both true.
Both are absolutely true. But the idea is if you have that consciousness, whether what I said or what you said, then suddenly returning home, returning to yourself, returning to your true identity, returning to all of these aspects of yourself that you lost either because of external coercion or internal inadequacy becomes a goal that we should aspire to make aliyah. I think it's much more effective to kind of change the movie a person is psychologically living in to the story of Am Yisrael, and then he'll just make aliyah on his own rather than just like tell somebody who's living in the movie of the American dream that he needs to move to some country in the Middle East. I think just a more effective approach. So we, again, when it comes to Jewish education...
That's true, and that's actually something I'm personally struggling with right now.
Oh, yeah?
Because sometimes when I don't have the proper forethought and willpower, I just throw it out, because I'm personally very perturbed and anxious about the fate of American Jewry, not only on an assimilation level, but also just on a physical safety level. But I agree with you that, working on the overall narrative, I just don't know if we necessarily have the time to do that. But I want to go back to a point we were just talking. I don't want to miss this. So I said, is it a student movement?
Yeah.
It is a student movement.
It's a coalition of different movements that kind of got together, led by Levi. The majority of candidates are students or young professionals in their 20s or 30s, which is very different from all the other parties. Most of the parties are, running candidates who are probably grandparents. And the majority of candidates, I mean, there is like a certain number of candidates that have to be under a certain age. There are a certain number of candidates that have to be female. These are like, in fact, it's funny because of the requirements to run like a certain number of females in certain places on your list. The World Zionist Organization actually forced us to move females down our list, meaning we had more females than we needed according to requirements, but because we didn't have them spaced properly, we had to push them down our list, which was interesting. But most
and
of
it's also very
people,
disappointing to me to see how deeply permeated is this identity politics within Western thought that they're forcing and coercing. So how about just the best people for the job? And I'm sure you, in your group, you have decided the best people were those girls that you put high up on the list. Great. But to coerce that...
And to just change it because it didn't fit the exact requirements that were mandated.
Yeah, it seems silly to me, but that's also neither here nor there.
Right.
So, but I want our listeners out there, if they're not students...
Okay, so first of all, we are very much trying to empower younger voices in Zionist politics because... these are the people who are really like living on the front lines, dealing with the campus battles, having conversations that the older generation, even our generation, didn't have. and applying like concepts that I think are very helpful in advancing Geula. Some of these concepts, by the way, might come from the left sometimes, but they're concepts like the whole post-colonial conversation is a conversation that comes from the left, but is very, very powerful when applied to Jewish identity and Jewish history in order to essentially bring us to tshuva. Meaning, when we talk about decolonizing, that essentially means tshuva. That means returning to who we really are, returning to our true identity, our true destiny, our true homeland, our true culture, and our true worldview, because it's not just, it's also a worldview that's different. It's also a concept of truth, a concept of logic that might be different from other civilizations that have dominated us in history. So I think breaking free of that requires these tools, and some of those tools come from the left, and we have to be able to utilize, I think, whatever comes at us, whether it's from the right or the left, we have to be able to say, can this be used in the service of Jewish liberation? Can this be utilized in order to advance Geula? That's the question we have to ask no matter what we're dealing with. And that needs to be the mindset. And that's a very revolutionary mindset. It's one that isn't operating from fear. Like you said before, it's not relating to the Jewish people as an object with a problem, but rather a subject with desires.
Right.
And we're...
what you're saying about Western conservative, for example, conservatism, that's something that you have in the past railed against. Not that there's not a lot of a practical overlap between, let's say, a ZOA and a lot of their Western conservative perspectives on Israel. You may stand in the same place as far as policy is concerned, but when it comes to foundational worldview,
we're coming at it from different
there's
ways.
a very, very different, which is an important...
Right, so I'm probably, for example, the ZOA and I probably both agree that the two-state solution is wrong and should be resisted. I don't want to speak for anyone else. I'm coming at it from the same perspective as the Maccabim and the Zealots and the Lehi, and I'm coming and I'm saying that my homeland can't be divided. I demand that my entire country be free from foreign rule because it's my homeland and because it's my soulmate and because this is the place that I've struggled for 2,000 years to come back to. And it has nothing to do with whether or not my neighbors behave well or don't behave well. I think that it's irrelevant. I don't have to demonize another people or other people in this land in order to legitimize my desire to hold on to my entire land. I can say that this is my land because this is my land, and I want to make sure I don't even have a right to it. I have an obligation to it to make sure there is justice in the entire land. And for me to make sure there's justice in the entire land, I have to have some level of power. I have to have some level of control.
Right, which brings me to why you drove out here to the southeastern tip of Judea today. Because while we're having great discussions, which we always have, you want to, and the reason I keep on asking this question, and I want to get the answer that I'm looking for, you want people to sign up to vote for
slate number 5.
Make it clear to people out there that are listening that aren't students
so
they are able to be a part of this party.
Yes, I will be very clear. Vision is trying to accomplish a number of very important objectives. Number one, we're trying to empower younger voices, and even if we are not younger and listeners aren't that young, there's certainly a value in empowering the next generation who are actually dealing with these issues, number one. Number two, we're trying to push new conversations into the Zionist world about what Jewish liberation means now. What does Jewish liberation mean after the Six-Day War? What does Jewish liberation mean in the 21st century? What are the next goals of Jewish history? And how can we practically utilize the resources of the Zionist movement to be able to accomplish those goals? What we've done so far by allocating Zionist money towards land purchases in Judea and Samaria is really, in my opinion, the tip of the iceberg, right? That's just the starting point. We want to get our hands on Jewish education. We want to be able to inspire the next generation of Jews, and we're good at speaking to the next generation of Jews. We're probably the best organization running in these elections that are able to speak to the millennial generation in the language that they can hear, tell the story of Am Yisrael in the language they can hear and want to be part of.
Now, let me ask you a little bit more about that, and we have to wind this down. We're running out of time. But you are talking about speaking to the next generation. What is going on campuses throughout America? What is the situation with American Jewish students? Are they apathetic? Are they far left, J Streeters, in order to endear themselves?
All right, I would never categorize J Street as the far left. I would categorize J Street as a liberal organization.
Liberal or left?
Liberal. Clearly liberal.
Okay. what would be further left than J Street?
If not now,
Are
JVP.
do they have a representation in the WZO?
No, they won't vote. I mean, it depends who. I'm sure there are people in If Not Now who, I mean, If Not Now is a unique organization where there is space to be a Zionist or an anti-Zionist, a two-stater or a one-stater, a BDS supporter or opposing BDS. Like there are people in If Not Now who are opposed to BDS, people who support it, people who are two-staters, people who are one-staters. So you have Zionists and anti-Zionists and non-Zionists in If Not Now. JVP is a decidedly anti-Zionist organization. J Street defines itself as a Zionist organization, as a liberal Zionist organization. That is the stream of Zionism that it promotes. Liberal Zionism. The quote-unquote luminaries of that camp are people like Peter Beinart, maybe Jeremy Jeremy Ben-Ami, certain politicians in our Knesset, from parties like Meretz, for example, Stav Shafrir. Like, these are people who are identified as kind of the leaders of liberal Zionism today. And I think that a lot of the things they're saying are consistent with some of the values and some of the writings and some of the aspirations of Zionist thinkers 100 years ago. They have who to hold by in the Zionist canon. I personally
That sounds like a very interesting show. We should do it another time.
Okay.
Because for me personally, I just can't let that lie. I have to throw my opinion in there, which is that J Street is actively advocating for what is practically the destruction of the Jewish state of Israel.
I think that you have a very definitive. I think you have a very strong argument. I think you have a very strong argument there. I think, again, I'm not one of them, Baruch Hashem, and I can't speak for them really. The truth is, they are probably our biggest haters. Like, the people who are most threatened by the Vision movement are the J Street people, because we are attractive to a lot of their students. Meaning that a lot. So
that's my question. Why are you attractive to their students?
Because we're giving them, honestly, we have a phenomenon. You asked me what was going on campuses.
Yes.
One of the things we should be aware of that has been happening on campuses for the last few years is that a lot of Jews who come from what we would call Zionist homes, AIPAC homes, even modern Orthodox high schools, become J Streeters in college, because they feel that the Zionism they were taught was too shallow or too one-sided or too narrow. It wasn't intellectually stimulating, fulfilling. They felt there was another side that was being hidden from them. I think that is a feature of the pro-Israel community, trying to hide the other side. And some students, especially bright students, see through that. And they need a deeper, more intellectually fulfilling approach to Jewish nationalism. We provide that in a very different way than J Street does, obviously. I think J Street tries to be, somewhere balancing like the pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian positions, whereas we're giving them a much deeper Jewish nationalism that's able to confront the Palestinian story and even recognize some of the truth in the Palestinian narrative without suddenly looking to betray Jewish history on any level. Meaning, even when we approach Palestinian issues, we do so as an advancement of Jewish liberation and not a retreat. Like a retreat, for example, would be giving up part of our homeland, chas v'shalom. Whereas an advancement would be finding ways to partner with certain sectors of Palestinian society in order to strengthen our hold on Eretz Yisrael, or to resist outside pressures to force us to give up parts of our land. Years ago, I worked for a member of Knesset, Aryeh Eldad. I don't know if you know Aryeh Eldad. And the first thing I said to him when he interviewed me was, I had to, full disclosure, I had to say that I really do believe that if there was no Western pressure, we would be able to figure out our situation with the Arabs, Palestinians in our country and Arabs around us very, very quickly. But if there was not one non-Jew between the river and the sea, the Western powers would try to find another excuse to take our land away from us. And he agreed.
I agree with that also.
Yeah, so
I don't agree with the first part of what you said.
You don't think we can handle our issue?
No, I think we can handle it, but I don't think that we can figure it out with them because of our side of things. There's way too many Jews throughout this country who are colonized in their own colonized,
right? In their own identity.
Yes,
and that's part of the problem. I think this is again a tangent.
Meaning the West has the prerogative and the right to try to interfere in things here
based on their own interests.
Based on they have the right to do that. We, though, do not need to cooperate With
No,
that,
we should be
don't-
resisting. We should be resisting, and I think that the Vision Party is shown itself to be very good at resisting and just using the resources and the funds of the Zionist movement to be able to resist. But we want to go further.
Okay, there's a bunch I would love to continue discussing with you, but we're out of time.
Okay, so anyway,
a last
slate
wind it
number
down.
5. People can vote at Zionist.
What does that mean, slate number 5?
There's 15 slates competing in this election. Jews in the United States have the ability to vote by going to zionistelection.org. There are 15 parties to choose from. Our party, the Vision Movement, you can check it out at visionmovement.org. One of our leaders is very popular with the younger generation, Rudy Rockman. You can check him out on all of his platforms as well, where he'll be promoting a lot of our materials and videos. And we have a lot of young activists who are very inspired by people like Rudy, some of them maybe even by people like you. And we're looking to come in strong because we want to push real conversations about what the next goals of Jewish liberation are and how the Zionist movement can actually make itself relevant to Jewish history by allocating its resources towards defining and achieving the goals of Jewish history. We don't all have to agree. I mean, I have my ideas of what's next, and you might have your ideas of what's next, and other parties might have their ideas of what's next if we were to have the conversation, but until now we haven't had the conversations. We're trying to push this conversation, actually driving Jewish history forward, advancing Jewish liberation forward. We are slate number 5. Vision.
Wait,
vote.
so you go to zionistelection.org.
.org. Yeah.
You're going to
You
see
register.
this whole, you register and you see a whole
And it
15
costs-
different parties.
Right. It costs $5 for Jews under 26, from 18 to 25. They tried to raise it to $7.50 for them, but we fought this battle. Our students fought this battle in the American Zionist movement. We succeeded about a couple months ago. So now there is a discount for $5 for, like it was last time, for students. If somebody's over the age of 25, it's $7.50 to register. And then you have 15 different slates to choose from. My endorsement, of course, goes to the Vision Movement, which is slate number 5. And if you want to learn more about the Vision Movement, you go to visionmovement.org.
Yehuda HaKohen, thank you for coming out here.
Thanks for having me.
Our humble little mountain on the southeastern tip of Judea.
Always a pleasure.
Truly always a pleasure. And I hope next time we can dive even deeper into some of these issues.
Bezrat Hashem, we could do a couple weeks.
All right. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
This is Eve Harrow, host of Rejuvenation, wanting to wish everyone a joyous Purim holiday from the entire staff of the Land of Israel Network. All year long, we, like Esther and Mordechai, uncover the real stories behind the story and Hashem's actions behind the scenes.